Hi, I'm Thaddeus Wacknamara, and until recently, I was a customer service representative for a major airline. Because of this, I know a lot about things that turn up later than you'd expect, are ridiculously frustrating and demand inefficiency by design, as well as somehow manage to combine a baffling combination of having far too many options and not enough options to create products that make no sense until something goes wrong and you can't do anything about it. So you've got an aisle seat adjacent to a window, no emergency door, extra legroom, no additional luggage, luggage overhead, luggage underneath, and no safety vest because you've decided not to tick that box. Alright. Would you like to customize your meal? No, I'm kidding. We're not going to feed you. So as a global authority on things that you have no choice in having to use, but also have no idea what you're doing with them, I believe this brings us on to today's topic of conversation. The keyboard. And by keyboard, I mean the one that you use to type words into your devices every single day, as opposed to this giant bastard which I picked up on the side of my road. So, back in the start, we're at about the mid-ish to late 1870s, and a whole bunch of typewriters have been created. It didn't take long before the design of the typewriters was deemed to be flawed because the operators had gotten so good at synergistically connecting with their keyboards that they were able to outpace the mechanisms. This was leading to jams happening all the time. Basically, they were able to type so fast that the mechanical lever arms that were attached to the keys were getting tangled up in one another, and it was causing jams to slow down the entire process. The concept was to create a frustrating and less efficient keyboard layout, which resulted in roughly an 80% efficiency rate, as opposed to the very higher efficiency rate of a good layout. However, if you've got an 80% efficiency rate versus 95% of the time getting jams, which took minutes at a time to instead of fixing the lever arm problem initially, the same designers went out and came up with the QWERTY keyboard. This was intended to slow down the action of the operator in order to reduce the number of jams and therefore increase efficiency by increasing their inefficiency. This is probably the most noted example of messing with the input of a device rather than addressing the actual problems within the system in order to make things better. This one's rough. Bear with me. Really bear with me. Now, Thad, I hear you saying, if you do the maths and realise that from every 10 minutes, 3 was wasted in fixing the machine, therefore, by gimping the typing speed by 20 to 25%, you increase efficiency at only some cost to potential, and an actual output increase of 5 to 10%, you'll understand that making the whole keyboard harder to operate yielded a net gain of efficiency while only slightly pissing off the users, instead of sowing continuous discontentment in the form of having to unjam a typewriter. Yep, quiet suffering is good suffering. Now that all sounds pretty well and good, but by the time they'd done this, it's probably actually bullshit. The reality is that they'd come up with alternative lever arm actions along the same timeline as they'd implemented the QWERTY keyboard as a standard. So all of this was probably completely wasted time, effort, and today we still suffer from having a really questionable keyboard layout simply because of nothing. I'll also note at this point in time that the company that was responsible for this particular development is Remington. Yes, the same Remington that has a click-to-impact device that causes misery all over the world today, still. Now we're going to skip forward somewhere between 90 to 100 years, let's say 95 and change, to the modern era where we now plug keyboards into computers as a direct electrical signals will be transferred from the keyboard to the computer without having an intermediary layer of punch cards or some sort of ribbon. There was a time where we'd type and it would get transferred to some sort of physical media. That physical media mechanically transferred to the machine. The machine did stuff. This era of sending the electric signals directly into the computer to be interpreted by a controller is where I believe the history of all of this starts, as far as I could be fucked telling it. So for a while there was a number of different computers that had a keyboard as a peripheral. Some of them had them integrated into the actual computer casing. The early home computers and hobbyist computers, such as the Sinclair ZX80 Spectrum PC, which linked the Spectrum and PC use for many years to come. The VIC-20, which was my first computer, to be honest. I'm old. Commodore 64 and a number of Amiga models had the keyboard integrated into the overall package that the computer was sold in. A little down the line, you had the Macintosh Classic, as it became, which had a wired keyboard separate to the main chassis. You had a number of IBM and IBM compatible computers that pulled the keyboards out of the metal box and gave them a cable. 80s. Not just cocaine, but also a lot of cocaine. And now we have the option, unless you buy a laptop, and then even if you do, to choose what keyboard that you use with your computer. So now we're presented with the illusion of choice of which shitty keyboard we would like to use the most. Starting with option number 1, we have ourselves a membrane keyboard. A membrane keyboard is probably the cheapest keyboard to make that I can think of. Maybe the one that I show you later. They're the most common one that you'll come across. They are usually bundled with whatever computer you've bought, and if you work in an office environment, they're what you're probably working with. How does a membrane keyboard work? Well, it's quite simple. You've got a pad with a whole bunch of electronic etching on it, and you've got some buttons that will close circuits on that etching on the pad. What makes the keyboard pop back up is you've got these little nipples made from usually some sort of plastic or latex or rubber. When you press down on the key, the bottom of the key connects the circuit on the pad, and then the aioli pops the key back up when you release your finger. These are really cheap to make because you're using just great big slabs of plastic and they will wear out fairly quickly, but given that the average corporate computer is expected to last 3 to 5 years, it's fairly common to use those. The people who don't work very hard are essentially subsidizing the people who do. You'll notice the people who wear their keys off and need to get more keyboards more often are generally the people you want to get to do work for you when you're trying to handball it. But before we worked out how to make plastic layered nipple keyboards, we had the idea of mechanical keyboards. These have actually become fashionable again. Instead of having the nipple production clicky effect, they actually have inside of them real switches, which make a satisfying clicky noise and use a spring and metallic contact switch individual to each key in order to send the signal forwards to the device. These operate by having a mechanical metallic touch switch in every single key and a spring mechanism to bring it back up. They often make a satisfying clicky clunky noise, which is great when you're an asshole and want to piss all of your co-workers off, but ultimately they are much more expensive to make. Also offer the interesting bonus of having the ability to, not that one, but most of them allow you to swap the keycaps on them. So if you want to have keycaps that are printed with your favorite degenerate anime character, Or alternatively, have dead bees stuffed into resin keycaps so that you can somehow almost stimulate the idea that every keystroke is hurting your fingers. That's an entirely reasonable thing you can do. Mechanical keyboards are generally considered one of the types of input device that do feel better and have a more comfortable tactile response. My daily use keyboard is this cheap piece of shit, which is a silent mechanical keyboard because I was banned from using the clicky keyboards. This one, I could in fact have my Evangelion character keycaps all over, but I'm pretty sure HR would come and talk to me very quickly. But it's also silent, and it is tiny, and it is light. This thing comes with me everywhere because the soft touch keyboards from most modern laptops are fucked. They are absolutely useless. I was having typos left, right, and center. I went on Ali, I bought that. My life has changed. It is so, so good. And it's Bluetooth, so it can just be stacked on top of my thing and carried around the office where I look like a massive wanker. Which I am. And because when it comes to gaming, the absolute pinnacle of input device is a keyboard and mouse. Don't even question that for a second. The mechanical keyboard versus the membrane keyboard is often considered superior. You don't have the same lag because of the aioli needing to come back up. The mechanical switches, much faster. Click, clock, spring, faster. On the note of gaming, the QWERTY layout led to a game called QWOP, which using the Q, W, O, and P keys, you attempted to forward move a runner on the screen. This also had a clone that was a horse called Clop. If you want to find this online today, you can go to the subreddit Clop Clop, where they talk about horses and moving them. Some people who are even bigger wankers than me decided that the mechanical switch is still too slow, and instead use a laser reflector combination where when you click down on the switch, it still does all of the mechanical things in terms of the spring pushing it back up, but instead interrupts a laser reflected light, therefore in theory giving even better performance. And honestly, there is nobody, no amount of Adderall, no amount of fucking StarCraft 2 online play, which is going to be able to discern the difference between a mechanical switch that's of a good quality and the laser keyboard. Well, the laser keyboards are different. Hang on, I've got one of those around here. Wait for it. So here is a laser keyboard. No, hang on. That's a vape. Some school child has run off with my laser keyboard. Oh no. But really, they do look pretty similar. This is, in fact, a laser keyboard, and how it operates is a little bit differently. It's frankly tiny. I thought this would be a lot bigger when I bought it. What it does is project onto a surface in front of it a layout of a keyboard, QWERTY, because that's what we've fucking got apparently, and you tap on that surface, busting your fingertips up, and it does make a nice clicky-clacky noise, which also has it banned from where I work because I type with my angry fingers twice as loudly that way. It creates a keyboard layout made from light, projected onto a surface, and then uses detectors to identify where you're breaking those lines in that 2-ish D plane, and sends that back up. They're not great. They're really not great. I wanted this to be a good device. I have loved the idea because until we get to the point in time where we can plug me in like Neuralink, but actually good, fuck you, Elon. Until we can get to the point where I can have a decent brain direct interface, I want an Iron Man holographic connection. I use a number of screens and I am a massive wanker. But that does lead us to the idea of virtual keyboards, because your smart TV has a virtual keyboard, which is fucking horrible. Like, honestly, how do you even comment on YouTube? But so does every single other touchscreen device. If you go to your local McDonald's these days, you'll have a virtual keyboard using a touchscreen that you'll type things into. So the idea of the shitty QWERTY layout being carried further down the pathway into our modern future is there. Touchscreens and smart tables, they all still just use the virtual QWERTY keyboard. Now, there are a couple of other ergonomic keyboards or vertical keyboards that basically mimic the same idea but a different way, because people are too soft to hold their hands out like this. If this was good enough for Thriller, this is good enough for you. Back at commenting on YouTube videos, I have a lot of what we call composite keyboards lying around the house, connected to my TVs, media boxes, etc. These things are great because you've got the touchpad, you've got a full mouse and keyboard combination. I basically operate them using my thumbs like a thumb keyboard, which we'll talk about now. The thumb keyboard was a great innovation. It's very much like the membrane keyboard, but instead of using the layer in between with the nipples, each one of the buttons is its own little nipple. Does YouTube like the word nipple? Can't get too upset with it. It's appropriate in this case, right? Ultimately, you're still pressing down on a pad underneath the keys with a rubber key. These were really cool when it came to the Sidekick, which was a much better name than the Hip Top keyboard from the 2000 and something smartphone. Nokia's had a number of very early thumb keyboards on their devices, which allowed people to text really, really quickly. And for something that was a 2002 phone, it was absolutely top-notch cool. It meant that you were an engineer or a software fucking person, whatever it was. But also the BlackBerry, which until 2010 was the preferred device for most school teachers to send in appropriate pictures and messages to their students. And I still feel for all you BlackBerry Enterprise administrators out there. Worst job ever. Back at the composite keyboard, these are pretty cool. I mean, this one only has a touchpad and a keyboard in it, but you can come up with some which have touchscreens, which have joysticks, which have all sorts of different stuff. And as far as me, lying back on my couch and trying to watch the hub for hours at a time, or alternatively getting on the YouTube and just blasting, this is a really good option. I wish I didn't have so many giant remote controls lying around, but I also don't. A couple of other notable composite keyboards are used in traffic control or other very specialized circumstances where you might need additional buttons that do macroing work, or alternatively lever arms or analog sticks or direct LED feedback. There's a lot of different specialized composite keyboards out there. They're great devices and they have their purposes. Macros though. Because making keyboards and other input devices has become so easy and so cheap, a whole bunch of different macro keyboards, such as this one which I use to create these horrible, horrible things using my horrible, horrible setup, are really accessible. So aside from using the sketchiest software in the world to program what these keys and buttons were doing, you can get them anywhere from this 12 key combo with a couple of knobs that also do clicky things. You can get like 3 key and a knob combos. You can get 20 key combos. They allow you to specialize what you're doing and program multiple keystrokes in. If you have a lot of repeatable things that you need to be able to do, you can actually get input devices that are very specialized towards them that are still keyboards. At least they're not QWERTY keyboards. If you hate QWERTY keyboards so much, why do you keep using them? Because I couldn't be fucked learning a better layout. Like, really, I actually did spend a lot of time using some alternate layout keyboards, and yeah, it's just shithouse. I'm old. I said that already. And alternate keyboard layouts, look, they are better in some regards, and there are some really good ones out there. But yeah, we're all trained to use certain technology in a certain way, and we've become very, very, very commonly comfortable with the QWERTY keyboard. I would love to try to adjust to a different one, but even if I walk up to someone else's computer who's a lefty and they've got their mouse swapped, like, that causes headaches for anyone involved. Some people game where instead of moving up, it moves down. What are you, a flight sim geek? And through my research for this video, no matter how many times I went to various different sources and alternatively talked to different people, everybody kept bringing up the Surface keyboard, and I really don't know why. This particular piece of shit is uncomfortable. The keys have the shortest stroke ever, and not in a good way. I lie, there is one thing that's worse, but this thing is so user unserviced, I can't help but think it was actually designed by Apple, who actually did make the worst keyboard in the world. But I don't think we need to go into that specifically. Plenty of people have talked to the Apple keyboard. And if the rainbow lights on the first mechanical keyboard I showed you tonight weren't a little bit something something, the fact that scissor action is a part of laptop keyboards and that horrible Apple keyboard, well, just something to think about. Just saying. Scissor. Not taking anything away from Apple, their soft touch is probably the best of all the soft touches. I just can't do any of them. What I would like them to do is go back to the real, ultimately tactile mechanical Mac Classic 2 keyboard. I would accept that. Those things were very much like my mechanical keyboard that I use every day. Very compact, very comfy. And, oh shit, that's the keyboard again. Fuck. As an Australian, one of the more interesting things that you can have happen with a expensive mechanical keyboard is letting your child use it after eating fairy bread. There is a certain something about flipping your keyboard over and shaking it and getting a half-ounce bag of fucking sprinkles that I'm sure is an Australian-only problem. Now, a curious little story about keyboards, which I cannot stress is a rumor or the words allegedly or completely unsubstantiated or satire. Whatever I need to cover my ass here. Back in 2008, we had a little bit of a scandal in Australia where a particular person in Canberra used to go around sniffing chairs in Parliament House. Really, a link below. As the tales have it, there was a serial keyboard licker out there getting a taste of his best life and was never caught, or at least never publicly reported to being brought to justice. Allegedly. Rumour. Or maybe I'm lying. And I just can't imagine this. Me and the boys in the warehouse actually used to make the apprentices who crashed the forklift lick the shared dispatch keyboard every time they made us fill out an incident report because they were fucking useless. And also, don't tell the unions that I told you this. Where does this all leave us? We have multiple generations now trained on the QWERTY keyboard or similar versions of it. We have amazing developments being made every day in terms of how we can transfer that layout into every medium possible. And we're all very used to interacting with a computer device using that. We're nowhere near at the point in time where we're as comfortable in talking to an Alexa or Google using our voice, because it's not quite there, but it will be in the next few years. What I would like to see, however, is the improvement in how we can interact with devices, but leverage off of this. I don't know what the correct answer is right now, but I do know that even though we're stuck with some shitty fucking Remington bad idea from the 1800s, we've managed to make best of this. And isn't that human ingenuity and adaptability at its absolute best? Shut up. I'm Thaddeus Wacknamara, and I'm whacking odd.